So to talk a little bit about the idea that's expressed in these week's Torah Parshas, the idea of the four sons, the four questions that are connected to the four children, and to understand how these questions are asked, what's the importance of questions, and how these questions are resolved. So to first understand that the basic way we live, the basic way we grow, the basic way we gain information is not just only by learning, by gathering information, but the deeper way of learning is, in fact, through asking questions. We learn by asking, we grow by challenging, probing, digging deeper, in order to make a kinyan, to acquire information, not just to read it and even to absorb it, but it should become really, truly ownership of information. We need to ask questions. And knowledge becomes internalized and it becomes ours specifically through asking the questions. That's why asking the questions is the most essential ingredient of learning, essential ingredient of growing. Famously, I repeated the story many times of the Chayz of Lublin, the Rebbe in Lublin was once walking on the street and he saw a few people, older people or middle-aged people playing checkers. He turned to his students and told them these people are no longer alive. They were obviously alive. They were speaking and talking. He asked them why they're no longer alive. He says because they stopped asking questions, which means they're no longer truly alive. So one of the students was very troubled by this and asked his Rebbe, and am I alive? He said, you just asked the question. So even the question of asking if you're alive is enough. The word Adam, man, human, to be a human being, in numeric value is 45. And that corresponds to the name of Ma, the name of the divine, which is called Ma. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is spelled out in its full. In its fullest, one of the ways to reach its conclusion would be, one of its formations would be the number 45, which is Ma means what? The koyach Ma, the potential of asking questions. To be human is to ask questions. And that's what we have to teach our children, to ask questions. So at the Seder, which is a experience of education, that's primarily we do things throughout the Seder night, the Pesach, so the children should ask. So the information and the Exodus, the story, the going out of Mitzrayim, should become not just an idea, but something that's ingrained. So the way the Torah describes it, and the way it's set up by Chazal, is that there are four questions. And each question is asked by a particular child, by a wise child, by we call the Russia, let's say the challenged child, and by the simple child and the child that doesn't know how to ask. There's echad. Each one is a child that has this echad. And this the total numeric value is 52 of all of them, which is Ben, the numeric value of a child. That the children ask these questions, and each question that the child asks, whether it's the child of the wise or the wicked or the simple, or the child that doesn't know how to ask, each child is told a particular answer based on a specific verse, pasuk in the Torah. And then there's the general answer. The Teretz Azoy, the general answer is as avodim hayinu, that we were enslaved in Egypt, and speaking about the Exodus story. So there's a specific answer to each specific child. And then there's also a general answer, which will answer all the questions of all the children. So we have to understand what's the difference between the specific answer, which we tailor to the specific child, and then the general answer, which means that it's something much more primordial, something like essential. That there's a general question that people ask questions, and then we have to understand what's the root of a question, especially an existential question. What's the root of that existential question, and then to address that question. So let's start with the four different children. The four different children, and the way we're discussing this process is that the wise child, the chacham, let's call the wise child the intellectual. This is the child that always asks questions, always analyzing. This is a person, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a child, because the Torah is describing a child, and we're all children. With regards to our Father in heaven, we are children. So this is the question we're asked. So there's one person that lives in their mind. They're living in a mind state. It's a beautiful quality. They understand things, they're analyzing things, they're always trying to figure things out. The problem is, and the danger of that is that sometimes people that are so in their mind, they understand life without ever truly experiencing life. Their thoughts are always overlaying their experiences. They're rationalizing. Their rationalization is a barrier for them to actually fully be present in the experience. And you know this. This could be you, or this could be a friend of yours, or it could be a child of yours that's always overthinking and never really allowing themselves to have the experience. So that's the question that's coming from the wise child. From the intellectual child, or from the intellectual, is a question of is a question, an intellectual question, but it's really hinting to the fact that this is a child that always asks questions. It's a person that's always asking questions. The person's always in the head. What do you do when you meet someone and you're an educator? This is also paths of education. How do you educate? And if it's your own child, or it's a student that is like your child, or someone that you have some type of influence on them, and you see that this person is always in the head, what is the response to this? So we tell the child, Ki hilchos haPesach. We tell the child, we tell the individual the laws of Pesach, and then we say, and we don't eat after the Afikomen. There's no dessert after the Afikomen. But the important part of this answer, of this response, is the talking to the child, talking to the individual that needs to be educated, talking to them about halacha. What is halacha? The laws. What are we telling the child? We're talking to them about the concrete laws of living. Halacha means the walking, the halicha in this world, the way a person walks in this world. So we say, you have a very profound question, and your mind is very sharp, but you must live life. And sometimes, or often, whether you walk through a door or you walk through the window is not a conversation. It's not something that you have to think about. Sometimes you just have to live. And to live, you have to let go sometimes of your mind. Because sometimes the mind, the intellectualizations of life, doesn't allow you to experience life. And not everything in life is an existential question. Not everything is really a process of necessarily something that you have to actually intellectualize, because that doesn't allow you to experience. And the metaphor that I said before of whether a person should walk through the door, when you see a door and a window, do you ask yourself the question, should I walk through the door or the window, is not allowing you to experience life. Just live. We're telling the child or the individual that for healthy educational period ideas and for the child to develop, sometimes you just have to live. Whether you're playing sport or you're eating, or even you're doing even a mitzvah, you're helping somebody, you're being kind. Just experience life. Stop always being in your head. Do things. If this is really a person that's struggling with over intellectualizing things and always being in the mind, the advice would be to do things with your hand. Do things practical. Do practical things with your life that doesn't demand so much intention, and that's the way you start re-experiencing life. This would be the specific question of the wise child, and the specific answer that's tailored towards that wise child, the child that is wise, or the individual that's over intellectual. Then there's the Russia. Now, the translation of the Russia is generally wicked, but it's really the rebellious child, the child that is always rebelling against authority, always not fitting in. Now, of course, this child this person is a wounded person, and the reason why they're acting out this way is frequently this comes because of a certain type of rejection, of not being feeling love, which we'll talk about soon, or not being accepted, not belonging. It could be social anxiety, alienation, inner pain, and the outer expression of that is defiance, is a rebellion. So we tell the person that's struggling, the child that's struggling, and we know that the root of the root of their issues are not that they want to really be rebellious, and not that they really want to fight, but because they don't feel some type of acceptance with their social this social group, and they have a certain type of anxiety of belonging. We tell the child like this: because you separated yourself from the collective, which means you're defining yourself in contrast to the group, because you don't feel socially accepted, and you're struggling. So what you're doing is you're cutting yourself off. And what we're saying is, is kafir be'ikr. You're really denying the essential part of what it means to be alive, which means to be part of the collective. And if you were there, you wouldn't be redeemed. What we're saying is that redemption possibility of living a healthy life is not possible for you. If you define yourself by if you define yourself as someone that's separate from the group. And we say, if you were there, you cannot be redeemed. What we're saying is, but on a deeper level, what the message is, we're telling him that you don't have to be there anymore. You're not there anymore. You don't have to be there. If you choose not to be there in that place where you're separating from people, you can actually be here. And if you're here in a place where you do belong, and you're a place where you recognize that you're part of the collective, you won't be acting out. So Elo Yisham Lo Yanigal is something saying something implicitly and explicitly. It's explicitly saying that if you were there, meaning if you're still in that state of mind where you're stuck and you feel yourself absolutely separate from the collective, you're going to act out. But the truth is Elo Yisham Lo Yanigal, but you're not there. You're here. You're not there. That's a choice that you're making for some type of conception of that you lived in your life. You're saying that I don't fit in. Choose to say differently. And then if you choose to say differently and you recognize yourself that you're part of the collective, and find your group that feels you feel comfortable with, and find yourself in the right settings, and hopefully if you're a parent or an educator, you find a way to integrate this individual with the collective. You'll say, it's true that if you be in the state of mind that you are separate from others, you're actually not going to be, it's not going to work out. And you're going to continuously be rebellious, and you're always going to think the world is against you, and you're always in a struggle between you and everything that's around you, and you're going to continuously act up. But the truth is, you don't have to be there. That's a choice you're making. And educate the child in a way that helps them understand this. Then there's the question of the simple child. The child just asks, Ma, what? Rashi writes that the question of Ma, of what, of the Tam, the question of Tam, or in Yerushalmi it's called a tipish, like a child that's a little foolish, or a person that's foolish, it's called a child foolish, or simpleton, a fool. Someone that someone doesn't know how to ask a deep question. So this is a question that a child is asked what, they're not really sure what's going on, ask what. What you really need to do as an educator is recognize the source of the question. So the first question was because the first question of the wise child, because they're over intellectualizing, so they're always asking questions. The second type of question is a question of trying to show that they don't belong, they're not part of things. This is a painful question. The third type of question is a question that is just a very simple question of what, and the responsibility of the educator is to speak to the child. To speak to the child with the mighty hand Hashem took us out of Egypt. Why? Because what you're doing is you're teaching, you're not just telling the story of the going out of Mitzrayim, the going out of Egypt, of Exodus, the Exodus story, but you're talking about the chayzik, the wonders, and the majesty of the event. What you're trying to awaken and elicit within the child is a sense of wonder. So to open up the child's question from a very simple question and say, it's true, it's beautiful that you're asking this question, but do you understand really what's going on? And then open up the sense of wonder to this child. And then there's the fourth child, who's a child that does not know how to ask. The child that does not know what to ask is not silent because they really have nothing to say, but they actually don't know where to begin to ask. Because there is something bothering this child. It's she'ein lishal. They don't know how to ask the questions. It doesn't mean that they're not bothered. They just don't know how to formulate their question. This is a child that you see is struggling to figure out what is actually the question that has to be said, because they know something is wrong. They just don't know how to verbalize it and to say it, and to contextualize and to say their question correctly. So the education process is a gentle invitation. At pesachla, it's a feminine quality. That's why it's in feminine. At pesachla, not ata, you, in the feminine. You open it up. You nurture that confidence. You help the question to emerge. So that's the responsibility of the educator, of the parent or the teacher, or just the general educator, is to help The person that does not ask a question, but you know that they want to ask a question because they are troubled as well, is to help them ask that question. This is the individual questions and the individual answers that you're supposed to speak to each individual child, because every child needs to be answered in their own way. This child is trying to figure out the right question. You have to give them the answer to you have to help them out, understand the question, understand that they could ask a question. The child just asks simple questions. You have to probe them to go a little bit deeper to ask the questions in a little more profound way. But you recognize that they could ask questions. To the child that feels that they don't belong, you have to, and therefore they're asking the questions, they're acting out, and they feel rebellious. You have to acknowledge their source of pain and their source where they're feeling rejected and not shum, and they're not feeling part of, they're not feeling part of the group. You have to acknowledge that emotional underpinning of where it's coming from, and then address that question and tell them, no, you do belong. And to the child that's over intellectualized, or the person that's over intellectualized, you have to just help them understand that sometimes you just have to live life and give them experiences, halachas, practices, which they can actually just experience life without actually being in their head. That's with each individual person. But then there's the general idea of the question, and the reason why the child is struggling, or the person is struggling. And often the root of all this complications. And of course, there are questions from the void, and there's questions from the broken vessels, and there's different types of questions. There's existential questions, there's questions to undermine authority, there are questions to l'shem shamayim, l'shem shamayim, which is for the intention of finding an answer. There's multiple questions which is discussed in great detail, and each one has to be addressed. But then there's the general understanding of why a person is struggling. Obviously, something is not working out, and they feel something's wrong. And the root of that is because they don't feel loved. They haven't felt love. They weren't nurtured in a correct way. And they also weren't empowered to do something about it. So it's lack of empowerment, a lack of feeling love. So the answer to the general question is Avodah Mahinu. Avodah Mahinu basically says the story of the going out of Mitzrayim. It talks about it talks about, in the beginning we were idol worshippers. In the beginning we were enslaved. The idea of starting off, we start off with the story, then we say how Hashem loves us. It took us out of Egypt. It says that we matter and we're cherished and our lives has meaning. So not only is it a story about love, which is a story that we have to continuously understand, that B'chol Dor V'Dor, now the Rebbe adds, B'chol Yom V'Yom, a person has to understand that they're going out of Mitzrayim, that they're leaving Mitzrayim, that Hashem is taking us out of Mitzrayim. Hashem is taking us out of our bondage, taking us out of our limitations, taking us out of our place of constriction. So even though we're enslaved, Hashem is taking us out. Why is Hashem taking us out? Because of Hashem's love for us. But also, deeper than the love is also the covenant. And the covenant comes with responsibility. So true love, if you really want to give a child true love, it's not just that I love you unconditionally, which is essential for the growth of a child, but also a sense of empowerment. And so therefore, true love also comes with the sense that this child is capable. And that's where responsibility comes. So this type of true love that we have to give our children and educate our children is empowering. It's not excusing, because sometimes love is excusing. I feel excused, no matter what. True love is not to excuse them from responsibility, but that to believe that they are capable. True love, excusing or love that seems exclusive from responsibility means what essentially you're saying is that you're too weak. And I love you just the way you are, which is important, a very essential, important part of growing up and feeling love and feeling that you're cherished and you're being held, and someone makes the space for you, which is the ultimate idea of love, but also with responsibility, that you're strong enough. It doesn't true love that not only protects a person from life, which is the idea of love, which is to hold a person and cherish a person and carve them out their space, but it also prepares a person for life. Not only protects a person for life, but prepares a person for life. So leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, was not only a freedom from slavery. whether it was physical slavery or spiritual slavery or mental slavery, emotional slavery, this enslaved being stuck to something that's outside ourselves. But it was also tachlis. The end of it was tavanas l'kim al harazeh, to serve Hashem, to enter Matan Torah, to Har Sinai, to receive the Torah, which is that the ultimate expression of the going out of Egypt, the going out of the slavery, this inner slavery, is to enter into a place of purpose. We were redeemed in order to receive the Torah, to carry responsibility, to live meaningful lives. This is the principle of love, responsibility, and education, especially in raising children. A child must first feel love and secure, of course, and without that responsibility, if you give the child a sense of responsibility, to feel like it's rejection or punishment, why are you telling me this? But first, love, and that's a sense of security and that they belong. But then love has to transition into responsibility. Because if love doesn't come with the sense that the child is responsible, what you're communicating to the child is that you lack confidence in the child's ability. And every child, every person really, but every child, and this is what education is, to truly educate our children, every child and every person must always hear this voice, the voice that you are loved and that you belong. Right? That's the underpinning thing of everything. But also, you're trusted, and you're needed, you're capable, and your life and your actions matter. And the more we can impart with our children and educate others, those we have influence over, not only to tailor our answers to the specific questions that they have, which is one idea what the Torah is, and Hagadah is telling us. And what the Torah is telling us by phrasing these four questions, these four possible responses to possible questions, to actually understand what is the type of question that's being asked. Is it a question because someone is trying to overthink everything, and they're constantly asking questions that's their coping mechanism to live life, or their identity of who they think about themselves is as an intellectual, and they don't know how to live life not being the intellectual one. So every time they're in a conversation, they're always trying to prove that they're smarter than everybody. And they're always trying to show their smarts and their intelligence, because their sense of identity comes from being intelligent and being smart and being rational, which is some of it is true, but it's not their full identity. And the problem with that is that ultimately, if that's their sense of self, of this being this intellectual, and always understanding things, and always being smart, it doesn't allow them to actually have real conversations, because they're not going to be dialoguing with other people. They're always going to be monologuing. They're always trying to show that when they're listening in a conversation, they're always thinking, okay, what smarter thing can I say now in this conversation? You could be that person, or you can certainly know that person, and certainly if you know your child to be this one. A child that's very smart and always monologuing and never dialoguing. A child that's always trying to prove themselves to be smarter than everyone around the table. And maybe they are. That's not the question. Maybe they actually are smarter. But because of their intelligence, because of their intellect, and because they're so in their mind, it's not allowing them to have real friends, real conversations, real communications, real dialogue. So you have to tell the child, Hilchas HaPesach. You have to tell them the laws, tell them halacha. Show them, not only tell them, but show them a path forward of how they could just be in life without actually trying to over-intellectualize life, just to be in the experiences of life without over-intellectualizing the experiences of life, just to be. And when they're with friends, just to play, or to learn, or to engage, or to dialogue, just to be there. That's an important education process, how we educate our children. And if you find a child that sometimes appears to be rebellious and always questioning, and the questioning always comes from trying to undermine authority, or the question is coming from a painful place, like sort of a rebellious place, and you have to recognize that where is the child's question coming from? It's coming from a certain type of pain, that they feel rejected, that they don't feel part of the social group, and therefore they're acting out, whether it's for attention or other things, or to gain attention, or to gain love. There's something that's going on. There's some root pain that's going on from the source of the questions, to address that child in their way, and to explain them that if you stay in that mindset, you will never be redeemed. But of course, not just to explain them intellectually, but to allow them to experience this and truly educate them and enter into their space, to let them understand this. and show them that there is other sham, that you don't have to be there where they're separated from others. There's other places to be where you feel part of the collective, and that will heal them in order to ask the right questions and not to always to be the Russia, not to be this rebellious child. The child that asks very simple questions, the the role of the educator and the parent is to say, "Oh, that's a great question. It's an amazing question. Could we go deeper?" Or even to answer their question with a deeper answer more than their question what they ask, because they just ask what, but they speak to them not just Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, but to give them a sense of wonder and excitement that will stimulate the child to ask deeper questions, to learn more and to grow. And the child that you see is struggling, that cannot even ask a question, you see something is bothering them. Obviously, by the Seder, it's not like the fifth child who doesn't show up. This is the child that does show up. It's just they don't have to formulate their questions. So you have to be sensitive enough to understand that there's something bothering them. And at Pesachla, you have to enter into their place and become the receiver of them. That's why, again, it's in the feminine. And open them up. Open them up to the possibility of asking the questions. And that's the way you open them up and educate them and allow them to integrate it, to ask the right questions and to grow and to develop. And then the general idea of the education is what the Hagadah is telling us, which is the structure. The whole structure of the Hagadah is about education, is about teaching our children and transmitting the spiritual wisdom and the Messiah, Satira, the traditions that we have and the minhagim to our children, to give it over to them. And if we recognize that the bigger question of all children and all people really are, which is the existential root of all struggle, is that people have to feel loved. They have to feel cherished. They have to feel that there's a space made for them in this world. That's the absolute essential ingredient of all education. The parents have to love their children unconditionally. But we live in a generation where parents love because we lived in previous generations of so much awe and fear that we imbalance to the opposite direction, which is just about love. But the problem is that with full love and just love, what we're doing is we're crippling our children. We're not making them able to really engage with life. We're protecting them from life. We're not equipping our children with the right tools how to engage in life in a proper way. So it's not just about protecting our children from life, which is love and holding them and giving them a love and showing them and allowing them to experience true love. But we need to do something even more deeper. And this is what the generation really demands. And this is why children are struggling so much, because they do have love. Even the children are raised with love, but they don't have responsibility. They don't feel that they can really do anything, that their life really matters, that there's value in their actions, and that they can actually participate in life and can do something. And that's the responsibility. That's the love. That's Avodah B'Yina. Avodah B'Yina means both that we were left in Mitzrayim and Hashem loved us and then gave us the Torah. That's true love. The true love is not just I love you, but I also believe in your capabilities. And sometimes because of the love, I step back and allow you to grow on your own. And that's the true definition of love. That the love is a love that not disempowers a child and makes them dependent. And they can't manage on their own. They don't know how to engage in this world. They feel very loved, but they can't do anything. They feel crippled. They don't feel that they can do anything. The previous generation, maybe people didn't have love, but they had total responsibility. Maybe the parents gave them no love, less love, and they were left to their own devices, and they had to figure things out on their own, and they managed. Okay, but that's not a healthy managing. That's a managing that comes from a place of lack of love. The real way to educate, and the healthy way to educate our children, is to give them love, is to give them unconditional love. Like what Hashem does to us in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And Hashem says, I'm going to take you out of Egypt. I'm going to love you because I love you unconditionally. Because the Bechir Klal Yisrael, I'm choosing to be with you. But there's a covenant. There's a bris. The covenant means a responsibility. And the covenant means that you're going to receive the Torah. And you're going to receive the Torah with love, eventually. Which means I want to give you something. I love you, and I want you to be responsible for yourself. I want you to carve some place out. I want you to become a Shutam L'Maaseh B'Reishis. The Sava Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem desire that we should be a partner in creation. And that's the ultimate expression of love that parents can show their children. Love with a sense of empowerment, not crippling, not that you're not capable, but you're loved, you're cherished, and your life matters, and you're capable, and you can do things, amazing things in this world, God willing. Have a wonderful day.